Okay, I think I'll get started. I want to welcome everybody, and I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. This is just a reminder that today's presentation will be recorded and posted on the Whitburn Center's website and YouTube channel. We ask that you please keep your mics on mute. We will have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. My name is Lisa Lewis, and I'm the Administrative Manager in the Whitburn Center for Governance and Policy Research. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about the Whitburn Center. The Whitburn Center was established in the fall of 2021 through a generous donation from our founding benefactor, UWO alumni Jerry Whitburn. Our mission is to conduct nonpartisan, practical, applied research focused on evaluating and improving governance, professional management, and public policy in Wisconsin and beyond. Our vision is to build local government, nonprofit, and community capacity to promote the common good. To do this work, it requires bringing people together in spaces like this one to work together to share knowledge and equip public professionals with tools and resources to better understand the dynamic topic areas surrounding Wisconsin's public sector. And now I'll pass things off to Dr. Mike Ford, who will introduce today's speaker.
Yes, thank you, everybody. So my name is Michael Ford. I'm the director of the Whitburn Center and a associate professor of public administration at UWO. I do have to point out, not to embarrass Lisa, but today is Administrative Professionals Day. Lisa is our administrator 50% of her time at the Whitburn Center and spends her other 50% of the time doing research and assisting with all kinds of stuff. And she made this all happen today. So happy with the work Lisa's doing and so happy to have her on board here at UWO at the Whitburn Center. So wanted to at least throw that out there. So thank you everyone for being here. So the topic today I think is really, really important. The nature of higher education is changing here in Wisconsin and everywhere, as we know, including more and more pressure and more focus on online education. And those of us that are part of the UWO MPA network know that we went from having a fully online and fully in-person program to adjusting to fully online. And that's brought with it some challenges, some advantages, and more. But we know it's important. We know that the public administration community, the practitioner community, they need talent development. And we're one of those places that contributes to the pipeline. And we want to make sure we're doing it in a way that serves the needs of our local government, nonprofit, and other government partners. So I think this is a very relevant conversation. I think it's a conversation that's perfect to be led by Kayla Nessmann. Kayla is a fourth semester grad student in the MPA program and also the graduate assistant for the MPA program. She also was relatively recently hired and started a job as the deputy clerk treasurer for the town of Freedom. Her goal after graduation is to use her educational and vocational experiences to continue her goals of doing government policy work. So today she'll be presenting her research on the advantages and challenges of online grad education. So with that, happy to turn it over to you, Kayla. And for the audience, any questions, you can put them in the chat, or we can obviously have a conversation. We'll have a conversation after Kayla's done. So go for it, Kayla.
All right. Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Dr. Ford. So again, my name is Kayla Nessmann, and again, I'm in my fourth semester of the MPA program, so I'll be graduating in spring of 2025. So I will be presenting today on the advantages and challenges of online graduate education. So when I originally applied for my MPA at UW Oshkosh, I had applied for the hybrid program. So again, that includes both in-person and online learning. So I was able to experience hybrid learning during my first semester, and then it switched to fully online the semester after that, so spring 2023. So I really wanted to do this presentation kind of just to share my own experiences of what it's been like receiving an online education. So going through some of the statistical information about what online graduate education kind of looks like, and then also some of the advantages and disadvantages that go along with that. So yeah, as I go throughout this presentation, if you have questions, just leave them in the chat, and then we can kind of go through all of that stuff together. And I really want this presentation to be just a space where you can ask questions and share your own experiences if you feel comfortable. So whether you're, an undergraduate student, graduate student, faculty member, community member, however which way you identify, just feel free to share what, your online experiences have been like. Again, if you feel comfortable doing that, or different stuff that you've observed. So kind of just to start out, I just wanted to start locally with, UW Oshkosh, and the master's programs that are being offered here. So we have 21 master's programs that are being offered through UW Oshkosh, with 9 of them being fully online. So I just have the list on here of the 9 I was able to find that are fully online programs, which does include the MPA program. So that's almost half of our master's programs here at UW Oshkosh that are offered in an online format. All right, so why is graduate online education increasing? So online master's programs have been around for quite a while. They've been steadily increasing since about the early 2000s or so. So the pandemic in 2020 has especially kind of aided in that increasing migration to online spaces, within recent years. So on the next couple slides, we'll look into what some of those percentage increases look like for graduate students taking online courses starting in the 2000s. So we're going to kind of get into a few reasons, at least, why there has been an increase in online graduate programs. So for the reasons that I have on the screen, like the non-traditional students and also that flexibility, these are things I'm going to get to a little bit more in like the advantages section of the presentation, but just to briefly go over them really quick. So non-traditional students, a lot of graduate students, including myself, are non-traditional students. So non-traditional students can mean a variety of things and take on a variety of roles. That includes being in different age ranges, having a family, having some classes, and then later coming back to, finishing that degree, working full-time, etc. So there's a lot of different things that can fit under that non-traditional student role. So non-traditional students typically have a lot of responsibilities, where online programs are really beneficial and to their advantage because of that flexibility that they offer. So there is that increased demand for online programs just due to the populations of people that they're serving. So with that flexibility, so that increased flexibility, it makes programs more accessible to more students, and it gives students the opportunity to, focus on their families, other commitments, that type of thing. So flexibility, again, kind of tying back to the populations that graduate programs are typically going towards. That's kind of why we're seeing a little bit of an increase, just due to, again, the demand, the people that are looking to get graduate degrees, that type of thing. All right, so then just to go into some of the statistics on, what those percentages look like. So this graph starts off in the early 2000s, 2003 to 2004, and ends 2019 to 2020. So what this graph is kind of discussing is the percentages of graduate students taking online courses throughout the years. So the yellow bars on this graph represent the percentage of students who are enrolled in online classes, and then the gray bars are representing the percentage of students whose entire program is online. So as you can see on this graph, for both of those, being enrolled in online courses and then having the entire program online, both of those have been steadily increasing since the early 2000s. So I wasn't able to find like any really good data for like percentages of graduate students after the year 2020, but just kind of based off of, this statistical data, we can make a projection that those numbers are going to continue increasing. All right, so then I just wanted to present another graph again on what some of that data kind of looks like, and just to show some of those trends that we're seeing. So this graph presents similar data to the previous graph, but it's kind of shown in reverse order. So the previous graph was showing the increasing trend in online courses and online programs. And this graph shows the decreasing percentages of students taking in-person courses. So this graph is starting in the year 2000, ends in 2016. So in the year 2000, almost 90% of master's students were solely in person for their program. And then by the year 2016, that number dropped below 50%. So 48% of master's students were taking in-person classes. So that was a really significant drop as far as who is in those in-person spaces. So again, this 2016, I mean, that was like 8 years ago already. So, with that being the last year that we have on this graph, we can kind of again project that that number is probably a lot lower now as far as how many, percentage of students that are taking those in-person classes. All right. So then just to kind of move into what the advantages of online graduate education look like. So I think one of the biggest advantages that come to mind for these online programs is the flexibility that it offers for both students and faculty. So because you don't have to be in a physical learning space, it opens up an educational program to students who might otherwise not be able to enroll. So one of the main differences that I've noticed between, my undergraduate program and, now my MPA program, are the student populations that are in my classes. So similar to a lot of other online graduate programs, the MPA program here at UW Oshkosh is made up of, all sorts of people of different ages, backgrounds, etc. So a lot of students are, working professionals, they have families, again, all different types of backgrounds. So you're getting to know a much wider student base because, again, of that flexibility, it really opens up programs to a lot more people. So that's actually been something that I have really, really enjoyed about the MPA program, is just getting to know students who are in a lot of different stages of life and who are doing a lot of different things. So you're getting to know that wider student base. So I think that is a huge, huge strength to, not only our MPA program, but I think just online graduate education in general. So yeah, with, having so much flexibility with online programs, it allows students to work full-time if they choose. So full-time working students, are typically taking classes that really relate to the work that they're doing, and they can apply that knowledge to their current position. So that's been something else that I've really enjoyed about the MPA program, because since I'm now working for the Town of Freedom as the deputy clerk and the treasurer, it's been really exciting getting to apply knowledge that I'm learning in my classes to the work that I'm now doing in local government. So I always get really excited when I'm at work and I hear like a term or something that I learned in like a past class, and I get to the two kind of click together. So that's been something that I've really enjoyed so far. But yeah, to go along with the flexibility, students are able to, save time by not having to travel to school and be in a classroom space. So students can, study or learn their materials in a location that feels comfortable for them. I mean, this is kind of an advantage and a disadvantage. Some people learn better in a classroom space. I mean, such as myself, I definitely learn a lot better in a classroom space, but some students actually thrive a lot better when, they can be in their own space or they can go somewhere else. So yeah, that can be kind of an advantage and a disadvantage. But another advantage of online graduate education would be that increased accessibility and network diversification. Um, so, online programs are opened up to, they get opened up to a wider geographic population because, again, you don't have to be in a physical learning space. So this wider population within these online programs, it creates a wider network of people that we're able to meet. So instead of collaborating with specifically just people within our own communities, we get to learn a little bit more about, different cultures and spaces, communities that we otherwise might not have a connection with. So in the MPA program, this is really helpful and beneficial because we get to learn about, the work that our peers are doing in different communities. Um, whether our peers are working in local government, nonprofit, like all different types of work they might be doing. And local governments, they all work differently. So just getting to learn more from our peers who are working and living in those communities, it's really beneficial for, I know my learning, I know my peers learning, everybody's just general learning, being able to learn a lot more based off of just learning about the experiences that, again, people have within their own communities. Um, So then the last advantage I'm going to talk about is being able to have a little bit more individualized learning. Just edit these people. Yeah, so being able to have that more individualized learning, being able to learn at your own pace. So because you're not in a classroom setting, you're really able to learn at a pace that feels most comfortable for you. So you can either move quicker through your classes and get your homework done more quickly. You can move ahead when you're in that online space. Or, I mean, if you're like me, you procrastinate everything, and I usually turn my assignments in at the last minute, but that's fine too. So, I mean, I think that there's an advantage and a disadvantage to being able to learn at your own pace, right? So I'll talk about that in the next slide, the more disadvantage side to it. But being able to have that flexibility to go at your own pace really works well for a lot of graduate students who are busy with work. They have a lot of other life obligations. So this is actually something that works really good for a lot of students. Right. So kind of moving into the disadvantages side of things. So the first one that I'm going to talk about, that lost sense of community. This is something that I have really felt over the past 4 semesters that I have been in the MPA program. So when I had originally applied for my MPA, I was super excited to, just meet new people, be on a college campus again, and, working with my professors and being in that in-person space where I can just have a good learning opportunity. Um, so creating community with my peers in an online space, that looks very different from what that looks like in person. So research has shown that a low sense of community for students is related to burnout and, feeling isolated. And those are 2 feelings that, I've personally experienced during my program and things that have been really tough for me. Um, so, the research and the studies that are out there shows that having insufficient interactions, for graduate students with other peers, faculty members, it again just makes them feel more isolated, feeling like they don't fit in, which can ultimately put them at that higher risk for dropping out. So yeah, that lost sense of community. Community is super, super important in online spaces to kind of help students feel more connected, helping them feel like they can kind of talk and connect with each other. So yeah, community is super, super important. So kind of moving on then to the second challenge with online education. So there's kind of a general consensus for graduate students having less satisfaction with online courses versus in-person courses. So isolation is a factor in this, but also just general like confusion, anxiety, frustration if there's not like clear instructions or feedback from the instructor. Sometimes it's a little bit um, tougher if you're not in that in-person space to, ask questions or feel comfortable speaking about things. I mean, just speaking from experience, I've had really, really good experience with the MPA UW Oshkosh professors. Not just saying that because one of them is in this presentation, but all of my professors that I had have genuinely been really, really good when it comes to like, prompt feedback, always willing to answer questions and, meeting during their office hours. So, I mean, I know I've had a really good experience with that, but I know that that's not the case for other students. So again, some students just have some frustrations and anxieties with, that communication piece when it comes to online courses. So then another disadvantage that kind of goes with the previous one is that some courses are just easier to teach or to learn in person. So again, just going off of my own personal experience. So during my first semester, when it was still the hybrid program, I took a budgeting course with Dr. Ford, and that was a challenging class. Most everything just kind of went over my head, and I'm really grateful that I was able to take that class in person because if I had to, I think, with that course in particular, if I had to take that class online, I think I would have struggled a lot more just due to the material that was being presented in it. So again, there are just some classes where it's a lot easier to learn them in person, especially when you have your peers that, you can bounce ideas off of and ask questions. Um, some classes, it's okay if they're online, but some classes, again, like that budgeting course that I talked about, really benefited from being in person. And the last disadvantage that I kind of wanted to outline was the challenges of like time management that come along with online graduate programs. So, studies and research have shown that a lot of graduate students really struggle with time management just because of how overwhelming it is to balance, home, school, work, life, everything in general. So without being in a physical classroom on campus, being surrounded by peers and faculty, that accountability piece just becomes a little bit more challenging. So online graduate students, including myself, we've really had to figure out how to just kind of manage everything and hold ourselves accountable. So, I mean, this is something else that I have personally struggled with. I was never really much of a procrastinator until I started my MPA. But that, again, really having to hold yourself accountable, it's tough. It's really challenging. Um, so I mean, that's definitely been a huge learning curve for me, especially, being in my undergraduate where that was completely in person. So being more on your own and having a little bit more of that isolation and having a little bit more of that not having as much of a community around you, some of those accountability pieces can be a little bit tougher, a little bit more challenging. So yeah, those were kind of just some of the advantages and the disadvantages. I know that there's definitely some more. So I mean, if people want to share those experiences for what that looked like for them, um, I kind of want to open this up to questions now. Um, I know that was kind of like a high level, just like overview of, different stuff that I have found when I was doing my research. But again, if people have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat or just, you can start talking. Or, I mean, if you want to talk about your own personal experiences, you can kind of do that as well. I also left my student email on the screen if anybody wants to, leave me a question at my in my email.
Great stuff, Kayla. So if you see in the chat, we have, in your experience, what helped build community within a course? It's a really good question.
Oh, where'd that go? Oh, yeah, thank you for that question. Um, so I think something that has really helped is, being involved with, usually for all of my like online classes, we have to write, different posts every week, responding to like faculty questions or whatever assignment that we have that week. And then we usually leave a couple responses for other students responding to their posts. So I think that's been helpful, is being able to, read what other people are working on and what they're learning in class, and being able to respond to those students. I think one thing I've noticed for myself is I think the MPA, the community, it's a smaller community. I mean, there's quite a few students, but I've generally noticed that most of the students I recognize at this point because we're in a lot of the same classes together. So I think that helps, when you're in your undergraduate degree. I mean, before you kind of get into your major, you're really just, you have tons of students that you have class with. So you might not feel that sense of community when you're just in class with a bunch of random people that you don't really know that well. Versus the MPA program, even though it is online, we are typically having classes with a lot of the same people. So at this point, I recognize and know a lot of the students that I'm having classes with. And I start to learn a little bit more about what do these people do for work? What do they enjoy for hobbies? Because we have those in like the student introductions that they do at the beginning of every semester. So you start to remember a little bit more um, as you go throughout each class, and you recognize people, and then you start to remember more things about them. So I think for me, that's really helped. I think that's kind of what's helped the most with that community piece is having classes with a lot of the same people where you start to feel a little bit more connected. So again, even though you're not in that in-person space together, like, hey, I've had a lot of classes with this other student and I feel, maybe I can reach out to them if I have questions or if I need something. So I think that's been something really helpful for me. So yeah, thank you for that question.
There's another one in the chat. Did anybody have an invoice one? I saw a couple of videos pop up. Looking at you, Dr. Lilly and Dr. Larson. Not sure if you have questions. Is there a hand raise capability?
I don't know.
There should be.
Well, can I just butt in?
Yeah, I think that works.
Yeah,
That
go
works.
for it.
Okay. I see participants, chat, react, share, apps, notes, more, and under more. I don't see hand raised, so it's usually there, but I don't know, whatever. In any case, you used some wording that very much intrigued me. So first of all, I like the idea of the notion that a benefit of the online is the ability to mingle with other people that you would not otherwise be able to do so in a regular classroom, which makes sense for an applied program like MPA if there's a bunch of people that are practitioners in that area, and you wouldn't necessarily get that in a local in-person classroom. And so I see that. But then when it comes to other advantages, I don't really see any. So I heard you say convenience and flexibility, which keep in mind, I've taught online in the graduate program. I had really great experiences in our consortium MBA. So I've loved it. And I thought the students did really well, but I'm very, very cautious based on my experiences because I've heard a lot of what you've said. And the wording that I was interested in is you said some people will learn better in a classroom and other people learn better somewhere else. And you didn't say online. So one of the things that I don't see as an advantage yet is, yeah, I just learned better online. I think that does happen with a few people, but my overall experience when I've asked tons of people, why'd you take this course online? It was offered both in person and online, is I hear all those other things: convenience, flexibility, work schedule, family life, this and that. And when I ask people, okay, I see you took the class in person and it was available online too. Why'd you take it in person? Almost always I get the response, I think I'm going to learn more. Can you that please? Because I'm very, very concerned about meeting the desires of the person who's shopping for education, and they want to take a course online. Okay, but yeah, are they really going to learn as much? What do you think?
Yeah, so you're kind of wondering like if students are learning as much online versus in person?
Correct. And for graduate students, I think it's different than undergrads.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to, specifically graduate students, I mean, I think speaking for myself personally, I definitely learn more when I'm in person. And I think, again, I think a lot of that kind of comes back down to that accountability piece and that time management. So when you're on your own and you're online, you really have to hold yourself accountable to wanting to learn more. Um, I mean, I know for myself, like it's a lot to manage, working and going to school and all of this stuff. So I'm often skating by with doing the bare minimum because that's all I can offer sometimes with an online space. versus when, you know, you're in person, you have to be in a physical classroom. You know, you're listening to your professor and you're having more of a conversation with your peers. And for myself, I mean, I definitely get a lot more out of that. And I feel like I'm learning a lot more and, you know, being able to take more notes versus being online. I really have to force myself more to um, do more of the readings or, you know, do whatever. For some students, that probably works a little bit better for them. But for myself, I mean, I know I learn a lot more when I'm in person.
Okay.
Can I just quick follow up on that? And I see a number of different questions in the chat, but for folks who don't know me, I'm Sam Larson. I'm an associate professor in the MPA program. Kayla, great job. And I know you were one of the unfortunate few who were thrown into, oh, we know you applied for our hybrid program, but guess what? We're moving fully online, and you've handled it with a lot of grace and curiosity and grit. So thank you for that. I think, Brian, to your point, I just want to comment / I agree with it. And I agree with the question, and I'm curious in the question, but I also think that like I tell my online students, online is so much harder than being in a face-to-face classroom. You have so much more work that you need to do. And I think that part of the work is the majority of people who are in our classes learned how to learn in person. And there are many resources where people are trying to teach people how to be online learners. And I'm just throwing one in the chat from University of Illinois Springfield, but I think that's where like my interest is, because how do we help students know how to be online learners when that's not what's been ingrained in the vast majority of their education previously? And that's not a question you have to answer, Kayla, but that's where I go. And what do we have to do as faculty to help that transition? But anyway, Mike, I wanted to make sure you noticed before you get to the questions towards the bottom, it looks like Rebecca had one that you maybe didn't quite see at 11:30.
Yes, and I mean, I think that's I think it connects to what you just pointed out there too. Rebecca asks, you know, do you see a connection between poor course design and passing a course? I think that could even be extended to, do you see a connection between poor course design and basically poor learning outcomes? And I can tell you this as a professor, I put a little chat in there that, you know, I just started teaching online. No one taught me how to do it. There's been resources we've been able to take advantages of, but I mean, I found myself totally guilty as charged, taking this traditional model that's existed for hundreds of years and saying I can just kind of translate that into an online, and you can't. Well, you can, but you can't do it well. So I know that it's taken some time to improve course design and deliberate effort and humility among the teaching profession.
My question is really pointed at, if a student is in a program and they have multiple courses and each instructor designs them differently, students spend a lot of time with cognitive overload and trying to figure out what's when where. And it's really, there's research on that shows that. So if, you know, a program has a template that is like a file cabinet and every course is designed similarly, then students don't spend so much time trying to find content. It's a lot more easier for them. And I was just curious if, you know, if anybody's experienced that, especially your student.
Yeah, I think that is a really good idea. And I think that's a really good point you bring up about, you know, if you're taking multiple classes at a time, I mean, that's already challenging enough, right? You have a lot of different stuff you have to kind of juggle. But especially if they're being taught in different formats or, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So having some type of structure where at least classes within a single program, like the MPA program, where classes have a similar structure to them. So I'm not sure what that would look like, whether, you know, MPA faculty need to get together and just talk about like, hey, is this something that is this something that could work for us? You know, our classes, I mean, depending on the classes, maybe there are some classes where a certain structure won't work for it, whatever that might look like. But I think it's worth a conversation, at least within programs, within departments, um, to gather, to gather feedback from the students, um, to see like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about the structure of these classes? How are you feeling about it? Just to gather some feedback about, from the people who are in those classes, and taking that to the department level and seeing if structurally there's something that could be beneficial for the students who are in those classes. So I think that's a really good point.
Really good stuff. So we had another question here from Michelle, whether you would have pursued your graduate degree if the only option was face-to-face.
Where did that question go? Oh yeah. Um, I mean, I really wanted my MPA degree, so I think the hybrid was definitely what really interested me, because again, I've only ever done in person before. In my undergraduate degree, I never once did an online class, so I've only ever known what it's like to learn in person. Well, I guess I graduated May 2020, so the last couple months of my senior year, I was forced to go online, but nobody knew what was going on at that point, so it was just rough on everybody. So I think I was kind of relaying my online experience to what I felt during those last 2 months of my senior year, which I know isn't a fair comparison whatsoever, because, we were going into a pandemic and stuff had to shut down pretty quickly as far as school goes. So I don't think that was a fair comparison, but I don't know. I think I still would have pursued an online MPA if I didn't have another choice. Um, just because when I was looking at schools, from what I saw, there wasn't really a whole lot of options to get an MPA in Wisconsin. At least, to get something that was affordable. So I didn't really see a whole lot of stuff out there. Maybe there's more now, I'm not sure. So I think if I had the option, I would have wanted to do in person. Online's just been a little bit tough for myself, but I know that for some people it works. But yeah, good question for that.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Just a quick follow-up to that, Kayla. I mean, I think you brought up a really good point. This is maybe not for you, maybe this is for anybody here, including the instructors in the room. I mean, do we think this is permanent? I mean, how much of our transition to online and prioritization of online is a reaction to COVID and just that disruption? And do you think we'll cycle back, or do you think that this is just kind of the new normal in higher ed?
I got a hand up. I don't.
Go for it, Brian.
I think there's going to be a new normal. I don't know if it's good or not, but I think we're going to adjust a few different times. One of the new normal issues is that we've got some professors who prefer teaching online. And it's partly for the same reason students like taking classes online. I live in Appleton, I live in Green Bay, I live in Ashwaubenon. It's just more convenient for me. And my own colleagues that teach online, I've never heard them say, oh man, my students online, they learn so much more. I think a lot of it is I don't want to say we're dummying it down, but we are recognizing the fruitfulness of meeting a group of students that want to take online courses, and they are signing up for online faster than they're signing up for the in-person. And we offer courses, both media, both modes, and the online one will fill and the in-person one struggles. So our students are telling us they want to take it online, but they're also telling us they don't learn as much. So I think it's up to us to sort of figure out where's the balance in terms of what we want to do. And some students do learn more online, and it's probably a small percent. Some students learn a little bit differently, where they learn some things better online. I've heard from students who say, boy, I learn more because there's a discussion thread that goes for days and days, and I get to mull it over more. And I challenge them and I say, yeah, but you could do the same in an in-person classroom. And they say, well, I could, but I don't. And so there's this convenient thing that's going on, but it's both students and faculty. I think one of the dangers for us online is that if we want to compete online, Mike, every single university in the world is now our competitor. So I'm a student and I'm going to go wherever I think I can get the best bang for my buck. Whereas if we compete with a mission at UW Oshkosh that is partly rooted in supporting the Northeast Wisconsin companies, organizations, and so forth, and we integrate our student learning experiences with things at those companies in a very fruitful, integrated way, so we're applying theory and practice, we will be much more defensible in terms of having students who want to be here for that purpose. Now, I don't know which is the right way to go. It's just that's how I see it as the way to frame it.
Oh, good stuff, Brian. Michelle, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm gonna find the link to the Chloe report and I'll put it in the chat in a minute, but on Zoom and searching for things, I just wanted to address that. The Chloe report talks about online education and what the growing demographic is for online education. And there are going to be some students that learn better face-to-face, some students that learn better online. That's going to be across the board, no matter what we look at. But the concern is when we talk about enrollment and we talk about the need to get students to our institution, then we need to look at what types of quality online courses are we offering, what kinds of programs are we offering, and how are we marketing to those students? Because you're right in the fact that our competition is across the board, right? They can go anywhere in the online world to find their particular program. So it comes down to what student demographic do we want to look for? What student demographic should we be serving? And, Kayla brought up a lot of good points on both sides of the coin, and it needs to come down to what's that one growing demographic, because we keep hearing the high school student demographic, we're going to hit the cliff, right? And it's going to drop. So how do we compensate for that? So
Yeah, it kind of gets back, like what you're saying, it kind of gets back to that accessibility piece that I was talking about a little bit earlier, about how when you start moving all of these programs online, you're widening your community a lot, which, that can be that advantage when you're talking about getting to meet people from all different types of communities and getting to open that up to a lot more people who otherwise maybe wouldn't be in that program. But then, yeah, it also does get to that disadvantage as well, where now your program just became a lot more competitive because, again, when you're looking at online programs, you can go anywhere because you don't have to be in a physical classroom space. Versus when you're in person, you don't have that competitive piece, because typically you're marketing towards people who are in that specific community, where it would be a lot easier for them to be in that in-person space. So yeah, it just kind of gets down to that accessibility piece too, again, where you're just having a much wider community of people who are now going to be within that program versus in person, where you might not have that as much.
I'm also
Oh.
raising my
Please
hand.
go for it, Sam.
I just want a quick comment on that piece of, global national competition for students. And what I've found really interesting, and maybe Mike, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, but the students that we have that are from out of state are students that, and we have people from, Colorado, California, Texas, all over the place, came from Wisconsin maybe they left 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but they're coming back and looking in Wisconsin where they got their undergraduate degrees for a master's degree. And it's really incredible. And I mean, one of our former students, Monica Jackson, she graduated maybe last year, Mike. She's like high level at University of California, Davis, and their extension program, could have gotten a master's degree there, but said she wanted to come back and get her MPA in Wisconsin to also reconnect with Wisconsin. It was affordable. And she wanted to talk to people who like were in a different space than her, you know, like had like other experiences. And like that's been a really cool trend for us. And we haven't necessarily been going after those students, but they're coming back home, even though they're not coming back home to get their master's degrees.
Yeah, I agree. That is interesting. And I do think part of it is right there. They're coming home, but then there is that name brand. And I think that there's still, maybe that's not going to last, but I think that there is still this moment that we want to make sure if I'm getting an online degree, is it credible? And is it differentiated from maybe not to throw, what's the one? The University of Phoenix, not throw them
Phoenix,
on the bus, but I think you still have sometimes a negative connotation, or people do. So the ability to say that, hey, I'm getting the same degree as the in-person student. All right, same diploma. There's some credibility and value to that. Now, I think that's changing. But I'm rambling. Monica's great. I think Monica's awesome. If you don't know Monica, she's great. Yes. Yeah, and then the chat here, good stuff. Michelle, I have 6 students in my online course that live out of state, but started their higher ed journey in Wisconsin, and same with Brian Lilly. Yeah, 2 Alden degrees, and they're the most rigorous programs I have been in and out of my 6 online degrees. Yeah, and that's a really good point. Good point, Rebecca. And that's why I do think that's changing. And I know that Walden, they're one of our competitors for MPA programs, and they have a very developed program, and following the same standards we're following. Other questions or comments?
I'm finally using my actual hand here, Mike.
Go for it, Sam.
I just wanted to circle back to another comment by one of our MPA students, Zach Kessler up above, just said, I think it would be interesting to have a discussion about the parallels between trends in online education and trends in workplace preferences. And I think that's another piece of this that's really important for us, because what does the future of work look like as well, right? So how do we utilize online education to prepare students for what may be an increasingly remote workforce in many regards as well?
Yeah. Thank you, Zach, for posting that. I think that's a really, really interesting conversation to have. Especially as, with times are changing with school, work, a lot of stuff is migrating online, and being able to learn how to handle that and how to work towards that. I will say that something that I really appreciate about the online program is you learn a lot of skills really quickly being in an online space. I mean, you become a lot more resilient, and because you're on your own and you don't have that in-person community. You have your online community, but that's different, right? So I think resilience is a huge skill that that online students are really going to get. And that's going to be huge. And that's going to be something that really translates well if you were to have, be in an online workspace. So I think being in an online education program, you're able to learn a lot of skills that are going to translate really well to a workplace, whether you are in person, you work from home, you do a hybrid, a mix of the two. You're learning a lot about time management and, how to manage your schedule and how to prioritize a lot of things. That's a huge skill that's needed within a workplace. So I will say for that, in-person learning, you're obviously learning a lot of skills, but I think when you're online, you're learning a new set of skills. That's kind of a little bit more specific to being in an online classroom. And I think a lot of those skills are really beneficial towards being in a workplace environment. And especially as things continue changing, whether we see, more and more online spaces, I think that's only going to benefit people.
Other questions? Since we still have 4 minutes, I know, Kayla, you're the main show here. Well, let's see here. Maybe I got another message here. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had a question as well here, Mike. I don't know if
Yeah,
it
go
was,
for
I
it,
asked it quite a while earlier, but
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Kayla, what helped make your online experience more impactful or helped you be more successful online?
Yeah, thank you. So I think what has made me more successful is really trying to connect more, I mean, specifically with my professors. So for me, you get as much out of something that you put into it. So it was really important for me during my program to take that extra effort to try and connect more with my professors, whether that was in person, online, whatever it was, just to have more of like, I know this person a little bit more, and being able to have that connection. I think that's been something that's really helpful for me. And I mean, I've had my professors for multiple classes versus for, undergraduate, you might have, I mean, especially as you're doing your gen ed courses, you might just have a professor one time. So I think that's been something that's really helpful for me, is being able to get to know my professors, through having them for multiple classes. So I think that's been one of the most helpful pieces, and just being able to, again, I'm not in that class environment, but just trying to succeed in other ways, being able to really manage my schedule and just try to almost do more to learn more in a way. Like I try to make more of an effort to learn as much as I can, versus I feel like when I was in my in-person classes, I mean, there's been times I fell asleep before in class, or I mean, I feel like everybody does that. I mean, falling asleep in class or zoning out when the professor was talking about something. So I think those in-person classes, they were really beneficial, but I think I think now that I'm online, I'm trying to make more of an effort to learn things. And, some weeks I can't give that much because that time management piece is so challenging, especially with working full time. It's a lot to manage all of that stuff. So, some weeks I can't give as much, but some weeks, if I can give more, I want to, and I want to make that effort to learn more. So yeah, kind of just going back to your question, I think those are some things that have been really helpful for me, and, wanting to succeed in my program.
That's great stuff, Kayla. Well, we're up against it. It's 1 o'clock. So Kayla had her email up there. Feel free to reach out to her. We're going to post this online. Some folks have put some resources on. We can go ahead and we can put those resources online as well for anybody that's interested. But thank you so much for coming. I mean, one of the reasons that we started doing these Whitburn Wednesday events was because of our shift to an online program. We wanted to provide more opportunities for our students to meet each other and engage with our larger networks. But also with some of the challenges at UWO, we want to make sure that the intellectual life and conversations about how we actually improve practice and what we're doing here internally, that they don't stop or get lost in the shuffle. So really appreciate everybody's participation here. And selfishly, as a professor teaching an online program who didn't get hired to teach an online program, it's so useful hearing what my colleagues and certainly what a student can honestly share with us. So that means a lot, Kayla. So thank you, Kayla, for presenting, and thanks everyone for coming. Any further questions, you can email the Whitburn Center at whitburncenter@uwosh.edu, or you can Google us, really easy to find. I invite you next month, May 15th at noon, where we're going to have our student capstones. So we'll have two students who are about to graduate presenting their original research. I can tell you that we haven't decided which two we're going to do yet, but they're always interesting because our students are the coolest and are very involved in doing practical work. So our capstones can cover a lot of different ground, but guarantee you'll find something interesting. Thank you everyone for coming again. And thank you, Lisa, for all your work organizing this and getting it set up. And yeah, very, very happy to have hosted you, Kayla. Great work.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah. Thanks all.